Hello! Thank you for watching these BC Ministry of Agriculture educational videos on food safety plans for fish and seafood processors. To meet the requirements of the regulation, you must do a hazard analysis that includes examining every product you make and each process you use in your facility. We've already identified what products you make and how they're made. Now we'll apply all 7 HACCP principles to identify any hazards, control measures, and critical control points. To begin, this video will talk you through HACCP Principle 1, Identifying Hazards for your food safety plan. This video mirrors pages 8 to 17 of your Food Safety Plan workbook. You can download a copy of this workbook from the BC Ministry of Agriculture website. Also on the website are blank document templates and some completed samples of food safety plans you may find useful. Remember, if you're transferring any information from a sample food safety plan to your food safety plan, you must make sure the information is accurate for your facility. The first HACCP principle is to identify the food safety hazards specific to your product and your operation. Identifying your hazards includes 2 steps. First, identifying and assessing the hazards, and second, identifying measures to control the hazards. Your focus should be on identifying food safety hazards that are likely to cause illness or injury if they're not controlled. And remember that any hazard to the consumer is a hazard to your business. Identifying food safety risks to the public and controlling them is a wise business decision, not just a regulatory requirement. But first, what is a hazard? A hazard is a material or agent that, when present in the food, can make food unsafe to eat and cause illness, injury, or death. In the food processing industry, there are 3 general types of hazards: biological, chemical, and physical. A biological hazard is a microorganism or a toxin produced by a microorganism, which can cause illness when ingested. Microorganisms include bacteria, yeast, mold, viruses, and parasites. A microscope is used to view microorganisms. Now, not all microorganisms are hazardous. Some microorganisms are helpful, even necessary. For example, the microbial culture in the cheese or yogurt making process. Some microorganisms are harmful but not hazardous. For example, spoilage-causing microbes that spoil food and reduce the shelf life of a product. Some microorganisms do cause illness when eaten, such as Salmonella, E. coli, or Listeria monocytogenes. And some microorganisms produce harmful toxins which can cause illness when eaten, such as Staphylococcus aureus and Clostridium botulinum. Cooking does not destroy all toxins. Microorganisms can be present anywhere, for example in air, water, raw materials, floors, walls, the food handler, dirty equipment. So most microorganisms require water, food, oxygen, and favorable temperatures to grow. So food processing facilities often provide a perfect environment for growth. There are biological hazards specific to seafood. These can include parasite roundworms in some fish, or norovirus contamination in shellfish due to water quality issues in harvesting areas. A chemical hazard is a chemical agent which may cause injury or illness when eaten. These agents are not supposed to be in the food. Examples include undeclared allergens, pesticides, cleaning chemical residues, antibiotics, and toxins. For example, histamines or paralytic shellfish poisoning toxins. Histamines can cause reactions in food consumers if they're created in the fish products. They can be created by temperature abuse of scombroid fish like tuna or herring, so temperature control of those fish are very important. Shellfish poisoning can result when microorganisms in the water bloom during red tide events, making toxins that cause illness. Another very important type of chemical hazard are allergens, which cause reactions in sensitive people. Seafood, including fish, crustaceans, and shellfish is one of the 10 most common allergens. As a result, you must follow the Canadian Food Inspection Agency labeling requirements to ensure your finished products are properly labeled. To understand the requirements for food labeling, please see the CFIA website and more specifically their industry labeling tool. It's also important to know which allergens are in your facility, if any, so you can avoid cross-contamination between different products. Please be aware that a major cause of food recalls is undeclared allergens. This is either where an allergen cross-contaminates a product that it's not supposed to be in, or where the labeling does not properly reflect the allergens in the product. So it's very important to pay attention to allergens and labeling. A physical hazard is a material present in the food which can cause injury to the consumer. For example, metal, glass, wood, plastic, stone, bones, extra packaging material. Larger contaminants are a choking hazard, while smaller ones could break a tooth or cut a consumer. Even minor physical contaminants like hair are serious because they can cause consumer complaints that are costly to business. All of these hazards can be transferred to products through cross-contamination. Cross-contamination is the physical movement or transfer of harmful microorganisms, allergens, chemical contaminants, or any foreign substances from one person, object, food, or place to another. Identifying cross-contamination points helps to ensure that potential hazards at cross-contamination points are considered in your food safety plan. This is why developing a process flow diagram was highly recommended in the starting your food safety plan stage. Sometimes cross-contamination is caused by a one-time only incident. Other times, an ongoing condition in the facility, such as unclean equipment, can cause a long-term and ongoing cross-contamination. In each of the following cases, we see that some control broke down or was not in place, resulting in migration of contaminants. Cross-contamination can happen when there's a crossover between raw and cooked products, a biological hazard, a crossover between allergenic products and non-allergenic products. This would be a chemical hazard. Inedible material or waste moving through the production or packaging areas. This could create a biological hazard. Or employees moving from one production area to another production area. This would be a biological or chemical hazard. The following questions can help you identify some of the potential cross-contamination points in your establishment. Is the same area used for storing raw and cooked product? If yes, then this is a potential biological hazard cross-contamination point. Is the same area or equipment used for processing or storing allergen and non-allergen containing products? If yes, then this is a potential chemical hazard cross-contamination point. Do the same employees handle raw and cooked products? If yes, then this is a potential biological hazard cross-contamination point. Do the same employees handle products with allergens and products without allergens? If yes, then this is a potential chemical hazard cross-contamination point. Is the food processing area also used for storing glass and other packaging materials? If yes, then this is a potential physical hazard cross-contamination point. When applying HACCP Principle 1 to your process, start by using Step 1 to identify your hazards. Then go on to Step 2, identify the control measures. Step 1, identifying your hazards. Using the product description table, incoming materials table, and process flow that you completed in the starting your food safety plan stage, consider the potential hazards in your ingredients and your process steps from when you receive your incoming materials from your suppliers through to when you ship your packaged products to your customers, and any cross-contamination points you may have identified. Incoming materials, process steps, and cross-contamination points can create hazards when disease-causing microorganisms or toxins are present in the finished product due to contaminated raw materials or uncontrolled process steps or cross-contamination, or when there's a possibility of physical or chemical contamination. For each step in your process flow, consider what can go wrong with the incoming materials, process steps, and cross-contamination points. Then think about what effects these hazards would have on your customers if they weren't controlled. Then think about what the effect would be on your business. These are the potential hazards in the production of your product. The following tools can assist you in identifying hazards in your establishment. Product or material specification sheets obtained from your suppliers. Sample food safety plans on the Ministry of Agriculture website. Remember, these sample plans can help you develop your own plan by providing examples of hazards and controls. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency Reference Database for Hazard Identification. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency Generic HACCP Models. Internet searches for CFIA recalls related to your product. Another very good resource is the Fish and Fishery Products Hazards and Controls Guidance from the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, or FDA. This is one of the most comprehensive seafood food safety resources available. For a comprehensive and user-friendly guide to microbiological hazards, you could also use the FDA Bad Bug Book. Here we demonstrate how to navigate through the CFIA Hazard Identification Database. From the introduction page, you can use the left navigation pane to look at both ingredient hazards and process hazards. We'll look at process hazards now, but definitely use this site to look at your incoming material hazards too. First, we have to select process steps. Then we have to press Continue. Then we have to select which category of food we're interested in. We choose Fish from the category list and then click Refresh. This takes us to the Process Steps list for fish. At this point, the site would let us search for all associated hazards, but to show you an example of how you can find the hazards for a specific process step, choose Batter Mixing. Click Associated Hazards. A list of all the hazards associated with batter mixing appears. There are two biological hazards for the process step of batter mixing. One caused by cross-contamination, and one from toxin growth in the batter due to time and temperature abuse. There are three chemical hazards possible for batter mixing. One is allergen cross-contamination, one is from residual cleaning chemical cross-contamination, and one possibility is improper labeling resulting in consumer illness from an undeclared allergen. There is one physical hazard possible with batter mixing, the often heard contamination with hazardous extraneous material. Simply put, there is some foreign material in the product that should not be there. This could be a result of employee practices, like wearing jewelry, or maybe poor equipment maintenance resulting in metal-on-metal contact and metal contamination, or maybe the splintering of a wooden spatula that should have been replaced earlier. Notice the hazards are described on the CFIA website in a certain way. They describe that there is a hazard due to another condition not being satisfactory. This is very important. This way of wording hazards gives the clearest information. This says that there's a hazard because something else isn't working properly. Using a two-part hazard statement with a due to in the middle helps identify not only the hazard, but the cause and the appropriate control needed. Now that we've completed step 1, identifying hazards, it's time to move on to step 2, identifying control measures. For each of the hazards you identified, you'll need to identify control measures that will prevent or eliminate the hazard or reduce the hazard to an acceptable level. Note there may be more than one control measure for each hazard, and many hazards can be controlled by prerequisite programs. For more information on prerequisite programs, please see the Introduction and Overview of Food Safety Plan video and the Prerequisite Program video, or consult Appendix 3 of the Food Safety Plan Workbook. Control measures can also be later processing steps or other operational controls. For example, to control biological hazards like bacteria, yeast, mold, viruses, parasites, and toxins, the possible control measures might include freezing, cooking, cooling, cleaning and sanitizing, baking, lowering the water activity or pH, adding high concentrations of sugar or salt, using preservatives. To control chemical hazards resulting from pesticides, cleaning chemicals, excess antibiotics, colors, preservatives, or equipment lubricants, or, importantly, allergens, possible controls might include proper storage, control of recipes and formulation, correct batching, proper labeling, employee training, monitoring, and allergen control and label control. For control of physical hazards, such as glass, wood, stones, metal, plastic, bones, packaging material pieces, possible controls often include inspection, use of a personal hygiene program, and often other kinds of equipment like filters, screens, sieves, destoners, bone separators, and frequently metal detectors or X-ray machines. Next, let's take a closer look at how to apply HACCP Principle 1, hazard analysis and identifying control measures, to our previous example of cooked crab meat. First, we want to list our incoming materials. We see we have crab, salt, water, plastic packaging, other non-food contact packaging, and several cleaners and sanitizers. Then we want to look at our process flow and our process flow diagram to find cross-contamination points. Now we can start to fill in the hazards analysis and control measures table using the hazards identified in the ingredients, process, and from any cross-contamination risks. A blank template of the hazard analysis and control measures table can be found in Appendix 2 of your workbook, or it can be downloaded from the Ministry of Agriculture website. Table 4 shows a completed hazard analysis and control measures table for the same seafood processor mentioned previously. This is the example found on page 12 of the Food Safety Plan workbook. The first column of the table identifies the process step from the process flow table. The second column of the table identifies the hazards at each process step. The third column lists the control measures for each of those hazards. As an example, Step 1, receiving ingredient, live Dungeness crab. There's a biological hazard, potential contamination due to the presence of and growth of pathogens, coliform, salmonella, listeria monocytogenes, and E. coli. So the controls are this product needs to be cooked before eating, and supplier letters of guarantee that no dead crab will be shipped to the plant, and receiving transportation and storage prerequisites, such as checking products during receiving for dead or live crabs. Notice there can be more than one control for any one hazard. Let's look at Step 4, cooking, and one of the hazards there. The hazard is a biological hazard that potential pathogen survival could happen due to inadequate cooking temperature and time. The biological hazards we're concerned about are coliform, salmonella, listeria monocytogenes, E. coli, and Staph aureus. The controls are the cooking time and internal temperature of the crab when it's being cooked. To start identifying your hazards and control measures, Start with your completed process flow table and get a copy of a blank hazard analysis and control measures table. Using the information from your process flow, start transferring the steps to the first column. Then identify the hazards in the second column. This will include analysis of your ingredient hazards at the receiving stage. Then list how you're going to control those hazards in the third column. It's important that all the control measures you put in place will prevent, eliminate, or control the different hazards you've identified. You'll also need to determine if there are any hazards that cannot be controlled in your facility. If a hazard that will make people ill cannot be controlled or eliminated, you will need to change your process or your product. Before watching the next video or going further in the workbook, please be sure to complete the hazard analysis and control measures table. You'll need this information to help you identify critical control points in HACCP Principle 2. Although you've identified all your hazards, please don't complete the first column of your critical control points table yet. You will do this later. Thank you for watching this video on hazard identification for BC fish and seafood processors. Please continue to watch this educational video series to complete the balance of your food safety plan.